pagdating sa kalakalan with China at maaaring sa mga iba't ibang bahagi rin ng Southeast Asia during that time. So, isa siyang very major discovery sa archaeology ng Pilipinas ng mga panahong yon. So, yung mga porcelana, for example, ay isang mahalagang window para sa atin makita kung how much they have been trading sa mga inchik. So, ito yung panahon na napakalakas ng kanilang trade links with China and perhaps with other countries in the Southeast Asia.
The artifacts found in the place is very important, especially in present time, because it tells us the culture that we had before and how people participated in the trading with our neighboring countries in Asia.
I'm Sylvia Lichalco de Leon, homegrown girl of Santa Ana, and a heritage advocate. That's a long story how my family came to Santa Ana, because it started in 1890 when my great-great-grandmother, a mestiza Filipina Chinese from Binondo, who started to become successful in business, built herself a little house right near the Santa Ana Church. And the family grew from there. We call it her Lola Grande house, like a little townhouse on Pedro Hill, formerly Haran, near the church. And because the occupants, my relatives, had to flee to the province, my parents were allowed to live there. But during the Battle of Manila, as residents of Ermita, Paco, Malate were vacating because of the burning of Manila, that little house became full of refugees, injured, elderly, children with nothing on their backs but what they were wearing. My parents moved in and made it a makeshift shelter for the hundreds and hundreds of residents of Malate, Paco, Ermita, and so on, who were coming on foot, bloodied, carrying their injured, carrying their elderly and children to find shelter, because we were the only place not damaged by retreating forces of the Japanese or by the incoming forces of the Americans. They then had to find somewhere to move to, and there was an empty house which they squatted in together with others, and that's what became the Lichalco house. So right after the liberation, my parents found the owner in the States, an American judge. They bought it, and that's where we've lived ever since 1946. I grew up in that house. My father wrote a diary. It's called Dear Mother Putnam, because he had an American lady who was like a mother to him, and if you find the chapter about Santa Ana here in this book, you will find it very interesting. It was very important to my mother, Jessie, actually an American who also became a Philippine citizen by act of Congress. It became so important for her to keep alive the importance of Santa Ana, because she knew it when it was a thriving residential area and it was important. Before there was Forbes Park, there was Santa Ana. So when things started to be destroyed, she asked me point blank in 2009 or 10 to please help bring back the dignity of Santa Ana, and that's what got me involved in preserving our heritage, developing tourism, etc. So it was really the plea of my mother that got me into action. But all our Lichalco relatives, many of them came, their roots are from Santa Ana. This is where we came from. To summarize, my mother fell in love with my father while he was campaigning for Philippine independence in 1933, and he invited her to come to the Philippines, so she took the ship on her own, quite adventurous. She said it was for curiosity, adventure, and love, which my daughter Sunshine made into a documentary. So that's also another story that would be of interest to people, I think, because it talks about what Manila was like in the 1930s and 40s and 50s.
From the early days, the Franciscan, when they arrived here in 1578, there was only a nipa and bamboo chapel that they first built, but it wasn't exactly where the present stone church is located now. It was somewhere along the downside of Santa Ana. The time that when they reached the point that there was already many converts in the place, that was only the time they realized that they had to provide a big worship center, which is the church. And that is the time They built the Santa Ana Church in 1720, from 1720 to 1725. 5 years in the making. They provided a huge place for the congregation. They made converts, Catholic converts for that matter. And since then, they were able to develop the community, adapting the colonizers' culture in our present culture. That a mix and match of cultural value that we have now that we still practice today. There are so many heritage houses known in Santa Ana. There were more than 130 of them 10 years ago. Yung bahay ng mga Lichaco, unfortunately, was the only house that was declared as a heritage house.
My name is Eric Akpedono. I'm a faculty member of the Department of Fine Arts of the Ateneo de Manila University, a research associate at the Institute of Philippine Culture, also of the Ateneo de Manila. Santa Ana is one of the few districts in Metro Manila that still has preserved, to some extent, pre-war ambience. This kind of relatively low-developed urbanism that characterized Manila before the onslaught of modernism in the 1960s. It's very unusual, and therefore I think it's something that should be preserved. It is something very rare, something very special. The only district south of the Pasig that escaped destruction during the war, and I think we should not allow it to go to waste in the notion of misguided development. The architecture before the 1960s reflected Filipino environment. It reflected the seismic grounds, the fact that our grounds shake from time to time. Like it basically adapts to our seismic activities. It is also perfectly adapted to our climate until air conditioning, until fans became omnipresent. There's a lot of foreign influence, but we always have to keep in mind that the Spanish colonial house is not imported by the Spanish. Contrary to what many people believe, the Bahay na Bato is not a Spanish import. It is actually a fusion, a blend of native Malay or Austronesian building traditions, as we can see it in the Bahay Kubo, mixed with foreign imports, not only from Spain, but also from China, from Japan, from Mexico even, from the Arabic world, from the Muslim world. So the Bahay na Bato is really a blend, a very international potpourri, a salsa so to speak, of different influences. What have we taken? Well, from the Spanish, obviously, the building of stone, but only on the ground floor as far as the Bahay na Bato is concerned. And also importantly, the building of the stone house is not carried by the ground floor walls of stone. It is carried by wooden posts that are inside. That is the heritage of the Bahay Kubo. Because, well, again, seismic architecture, you want to build something that can withstand earthquakes. Stone walls, unless they are reinforced, do not perform very well during earthquakes. That's why the Bahay na Bato, despite its name, is actually carried by wooden posts, not by the stone walls. You can take them away, please don't. But if you have any, leave them there because they are to enclose the space, but they do not carry the floor or the roof. You have Mexican influence. You see Mexican influence in the churches, in the patios that are in front of churches. In Mexico, churches usually have a forecourt, a patio, that is where during the early colonial period, Mass would be held for the huge number of new converts. And that is something that was brought over to the Philippines. And you can see it in the forecourts or patios, for example, of San Agustin Church. You can see it in the former Franciscan churches in Intramuros. That's a feature that you don't see in Spain, where churches are usually in line with the street front, with the houses of the street. It's something specifically Mexican.
The Taoist temple behind the church was built in 1800s. Well, as an institution, there was already 3 different Chinese faith there. And it was built right across the Virgen del Pozo, which is believed to be a miraculous well. The well existed years prior to the construction of that stone church. And many folks around here believe that the well there is miraculous. For they claim na nakakagaling ng mga sakit nila each time na iniinom nila ng mga panahon na yun. Yung mga Chinese na nakahalo na sa community ng Santa Ana, na-influence sila dun sa belief na yun. So the moment they build their temple there, and right across, which is the Virgen del Pozo, in the middle is the road of the Lamayan Street. Before you'll see only candles being offered along with the prayers of devotees doon sa Virgen del Pozo. It's the same image of the Our Lady of the Abandon. While on the other side, on the Taoist temple, yung mga joss stick lang ino-offer nila doon, mga insenso. But over time, nagkaroon na tinatawag na syncretism or mixture of religious faith na kung saan on both worship centers, you'll see joss sticks and candles being offered both by early Chinese people and early Santa Ana residents, to which hanggang ngayon practice yun.
There's the story of the Chinese lady who was in the market selling fabric, and a beautiful lady went to buy. She bought the fabric, and later on that Chinese lady, saw in the Catholic Church that the clothing and the Virgin Mary was that fabric that she sold her. She was so impressed and blessed. She started the Chinese temple, the Taoist temple across the street. And in that Chinese temple, along with the Chinese deities, there was a small Virgin Mary. Well, other than the Catholic Church, which is the center of our heritage zone, there are many other religions that are practiced here. I think the first Iglesia ni Cristo Church was also in Santa Ana, for example. So actually, it's a multi-religious community. Santa Ana really was a melting pot of many cultures, and that culture is still alive today. And that's what we want to keep, is the cultural heritage of Santa Ana for future generations like yourself to enjoy.
Ako po si Lou Veloso, isang actor-politician, at ang pagkakaintindi ko sa cultural heritage ng Santa Ana ay napakahalaga. Ito'y magtuturo sa atin, magpapaalam kung anong mga pinagdaanan, kung bakit nanatili ang mga istruktura, ang mga lugar, ang mga kaugalian na pwede nating pagtibayin na tayo ay taga Santa Ana. Katulad sa amin, naggawa kami dito ng community theater na nung una, ang mga batang sumasali dyan sa mga play na ginagawa namin ay mga batang komunidad, tricycle driver, taxi driver, tindera sa palengke. So, sila yung sumali sa mga play na ginagawa namin, especially yung ito nga na passion play na 32 years na namin ginagawa. Although naglakihan na yung mga bata nung araw, meron na sa mga sarili-sariling pamilya at trabaho. Pero bumabalik pa rin sila, binabalikan. Makakontribute man lang kahit papaano para sa pangkain sa rehearsal, bumabalik. Kasi meron kang naituro at meron kang naitanim sa mga batang ito na mamahalin nila. So, ganun din yung cultural aspect ng isang komunidad. Hanggat mayroong natutunan ang mga kabataan sa mga inilahad nyo na pwede nating panghawakan anuman ang maging estado natin sa buhay, babalik at babalik.
This is a very special place with a lot of myths and traditions. For example, about the snakes in the tower. The Japanese sentries wanted to go up to the tower and use it as a point where they could have snipers to shoot us. And when they went up there, it was full of snakes. And they ran away from there. And when the parish priest went up, there was nothing but coils of rope. Another miracle.
There was a lithograph printing which shows the elegance of the main part of the Santa Ana, na kung saan Yung mga Europeans in their glamour dress, they showcase how fashionable they were. And we were influenced with that, yung mga mestiza natin. Sumabay sila doon sa fashion na yon. And it shows also their faith, kasi especially on Sundays, they roam around Plaza Calderon. Tinatawag natin noon na Damuhan. And then we have the Plaza Hugo. People are participating in the procession. Umiikot lang sila dyan sa Plaza Calderon. Unlike ngayon na umiikot lahat ng iskita, dinadaanan. And then we value this kind of practices.
Santa Ana contributed a lot sa kung ano yung maaring intramuros ngayon, being the center of trade, no, from the lake going outside sa Maynila, no. Then sinakop ng mga Espanyol ang Maynila particular at around 19th century, 18th century. They find Santa Ana still a very viable place to live in dahil sa magandang landscape, sa rivers and everything. At doon nanirahan ng mga prominenteng mga pamilya.
Did you know about the Manila Boat Club? That was the oldest sports club that we have in the Philippines. It was started again by foreigners who love to row. So the Pasig River became a center of rowing. And they were international regattas. And there was a huge, beautiful lawn where they'd have parties. It was very elegant. And at first, they didn't allow Filipinos. But later on, my father, Marshall, rowed at Harvard College, and he was allowed in. So he was the first Filipino member because he knew how to row. That Manila Boat Club should be preserved. It has been designated an important cultural property, and those who run it and the city of Manila and the neighborhood and barangay should attend to it and keep it in good shape for others to enjoy. Rowing is actually quite fun. I've tried it on the Pasig River. Another thing is about the Santa Ana racetrack. I had the privilege of sitting in the judge's stand because my ninong, an uncle, was a judge, and he used to bring me at age 6 to sit on his lap, and I'd watch the horses go by. And then they'd take the picture of whose horse won by a nose, and I'd run up and follow the photographer, and he'd print it and then hold it up, still dripping, and then based on whose nose won, they'd put the flag up and everybody run to collect their money. It was so much fun. And another interesting thing is the Santa Ana Cabaret. The Santa Ana Cabaret was a huge place where people went to dance. And there are some excellent pictures of our former presidents, Quezon, Rojas, senators, and important personages who used to go there and dance the night away. So Santa Ana Cabaret no longer exists, but the memories are there with all the old folks. If you talk to an old person from Santa Ana, they know Santa Ana Cabaret. So really, we had quite a diversity of activities, nationalities, religions, customs, and traditions. And that's what makes Santa Ana so special.
Santa Ana is located at the endmost part of Manila. And before, we're like being left behind. Kasi ang progression nandun sa Central Manila, malapit sa City Hall, sa Luneta. So ito kami, nasa boundary kami ng Makati and Mandaluyong. It is only now that we realize na okay pala sana kung kami napapag-iwanan. Kasi at least kami nung time na yon, tahimik kami. We were able to provide a nostalgic ambience para kaming nasa outskirts na o parang probinsya na. Kasi nga, satisfied kami na ganito lang kami. All the old houses were still there. I'm telling this because of the present development na nangyayari ngayon. We already have one high-rise there, and now we're being challenged with another high-rise condominium being built along New Panedoros Street. That set up the church in between. One in Pedro Hill and one in Lamayan. The church is here. Tapos, dalawang high-rise structure yon. It will make the church dwarf or duwende, magmumukhang malit na lumang structure. Yung pagkaklasify sa amin as a very important histocultural heritage overlay zone because of the old structures that we have around. The church in particular being the oldest one. Yung tinatawag nating line of sight sa isang heritage zone, it will be completely eliminated if Manila City Hall will continue to permit the developers to build huge structure around Santa Ana.
we have this big developer who's causing a huge commotion. It's a heritage crisis in Santa Ana. Because sometimes a big developer will come and listen to the community needs, like for example, SM and Save More did, or Jollibee did, where they compromised and they gave us something that we appreciate and want, and yet they can still make a lot of money. But sometimes you get the developer who's a bit on the greedy side, like a certain major developer now, who doesn't care about anything. And although they might pretend to talk to the community, they're not listening. And they're trying to build without legitimate barangay clearance, without an environmental clearance certificate. They're building 3 towers of 36 stories each, destroying the quiet neighborhood, and the elderly and the persons with disability right there in that area are up in arms because every day, without proper documentation, without proper permission, they are breaking the law and they are ruining the lives of these neighborhood people. And that company is SunTrust Essentia, a subsidiary of MegaWorld owned by a very wealthy Filipino Chinese called Andrew Tan. And I think if Andrew Tan were just to listen, to come down and talk to the community and listen to what we want and what we need, if he would bend from his palace up there, maybe we can get to him. It's worth a try.
There is a heritage law in place where the heritage advocates continue to promote our Filipino values through our culture. In Santa Ana, yearly, laging merong road development. Bungkal dito, bungkal doon. Hindi nasusunod yung sinasabi ng National Museum na lalo na ang Santa Ana, dahil nga doon sa 1966 archaeological excavation na nangyari dito at maraming artifacts na nakita, dineklara ng Pangulo noon, noong panahon na yon, na ang Santa Ana ay tawagin na isang archaeological site. Meaning to say, hindi ka basta pwedeng maghukay dyan kahit pag-aari mo yung lupa. Prior to any development, you should seek permit from the City Hall or directly from National Museum so that they would ask you to hire a third-party archaeologist para i-examine mo na yung lupa bago bungkalin. Because of the notorious way of digging around Santa Ana, since I live in Santa Ana, each time na meron digging dito, may tinatawag yung mga archaeologists na back dirt. Ayun yung pag hinukay mo, nakapatong lang dyan, iipunin yan. So sa tumpok ng mga inipon na yun, na galing sa ilalim ng lupa ng Santa Ana, at dahil sa familiar na rin yung mata ko sa mga artifacts all this time, ito yung nakita kong pieces which I strongly believe that these are very important artifacts. Ang artifacts ay likhang tao o liktaw. Kung sila lang sumunod sa tamang proseso ng pag-examine ng mga lupa o pag-aaral ng mga lupa, di sana ang nakita natin ay itong mga pieces of wares na ito. This was found in a private property along Lamayan Road or along Lamayan Street. And this is believed to be manufactured during the Sung Dynasty. This is around 12th or 14th century. Sung or Pre-Ming Dynasty. What a beautiful art, okay, of the past. This also shows how extensive early Santa Ana residents participated in maritime trading. It tells the people of this generation of the very beautiful story of Santa Ana in early years.
Ang Santa Ana Archaeological Site ay isa sa mga natatanging site hindi lang sa Maynila kundi sa buong Pilipinas dahil ito yung isa sa mga very concrete na ebidensya na may pre-colonial culture ang mga taga-Maynila. No? At the fact na nandito mismo sa Santa Ana siya na natagpuan helps us to understand kung gaano ka-significant para sa mga taga-Santa Ana ang kanilang lugar.
Santa Ana is being treated like any other barrio anywhere else in the Philippines, without taking into consideration its unique heritage, which is largely preserved, unlike in pretty much most of the rest of Metro Manila. We don't want to turn historic districts into museums, and we shouldn't. How do you conform with the two. Development must be there, but it should be in harmony with what is already in existence. For example, for Santa Ana, that would mean whatever development comes into Santa Ana should, in terms of massing, in terms of height, in terms of volume, adapt to the relatively small grid of Santa Ana. You have a pretty small-scale urban neighborhood, and whatever comes in anew should conform to that. In other words, you should not have very big developments like gigantic supermarkets or shopping malls. It also means you should not have high-rises beyond, say, 3-4 stories. Because if you have those, they basically destroy the grown fabric of the historic district.
The aggressive development that is happening in Manila, which is also happened in the entire land. Yung progression kasi, ayos lang yan. Modernity, ayos lang yan. Kaya lang, ang modernity, there should be a place for it. Para tinawag mo isang lugar, kagaya ng Santa Ana, kinlasify ng Manila City Council as a very important histocultural heritage overlay zone because of its existing old structures na dumaan ng gera noong 1940s, nagkaroon ng liberation noong 1945, but these structures are still standing around. Unlike sa ibang lugar, ang lumang bahay, museum na. Sa Santa Ana, tingnan mo lahat ng old houses dito, yung mga heritage houses, it still serve its purpose as shelter for family. Living houses pa rin yan. If we will continue to notoriously develop this place into modernity na sinasabi nila, you will only eliminating the true identity of Santa Ana.
Promote the cultural significance of Santa Ana through myths, legends, and stories, train the teachers, so many ways. Before the church disappears, before the last beautiful heritage houses are gone, wake up and appreciate and do something about it. Because this is for you, the youth. As Nick Joaquin said in his book, Manila, My Manila, Santa Ana is the womb of Manila. Now, all kinds of myths and traditions and cooking and folklore comes from all this, and that's a whole other story that I hope people like yourself will value, write about, and promote to the youth of the country.
Ay payo ko sa mga bata, walang mawawala. Walang mawawala kung aalamin natin ang mga bagay na hindi sa atin nasabi ng ating mga magulang tungkol sa lugar na tinitirhan natin. Maging aware tayo na mayroon tayong isang lugar na napakayaman sa kultura dahil naipapakita ito ng mga structures ng lugar. Napakagandang alamin na ang Santa Ana ay parte ng history ng lugar, na syudad, at marami tayong malalaan sa pagre-research natin ng isang community. Importante na ang mga kabataan ngayon ay maging aware sa kanilang tinitirahan.
The reason why we determine a place as heritage zone is for everybody to learn about our past, because our past is telling us our identity as Filipinos. There are people that wala silang sariling identity, lumaki na walang parents, hindi na alam kung saan galing yung roots nila. So tayo bilang mga Filipinos, that is something that we are really longing for. It's how we look at our future by simply looking at our past. And I'm telling this to the youth of today because someday I believe they will become leaders of this nation. They should learn about these things that is happening now. Probably someday pag naupo sila, who knows, baka wala na silang babalikan. Wala na silang lilingunin, wala na silang pupuntahan mga lumang places kasi lahat modern na. So, what Santa Ana is known for, sana the Manila City Council would help us to make this place as it is. Since this place also serves as one huge museum because of the artifacts that can be seen around, one of which is this huge church. Don't you think this is an artifact?
Heritage belongs to all of us, Filipinos, born and unborn.